I'm so grateful for you to be here. I'm Rabbi Cat on Ohlone territory in Emeryville, California. Jonathan, I don't actually, well, when more people come, I think I'm just going to have you introduce yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll do my short introduction. You can expand upon it in whatever way you'd like. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So as we're getting ready, I'm just going to ask everybody to ground yourself. So find your feet touching the ground if you can. Feel yourself doing it too. Feel yourself settling in. You might have just arrived home, or maybe you're driving, or maybe maybe you've had a long day, and we're so grateful you're here. This is going to be a really wonderful conversation, and we might hear things that are challenging. We're going to really be blunt and honest and really clear about what's happening and what we hope could happen if we can get there. And so I want us to be in our bodies and grounded, so that when things are difficult to hear or upsetting to hear, that we can find our way back into ourselves and stay present and stay open, keep our hearts open, keep our minds open. So go ahead and take some deep breaths. Find yourself, feel the chair or the couch or whatever it is that you're sitting on underneath you. Notice the connection between your legs and your back and the chair or whatever it is, so that you are feeling yourself present in your body. Often we get reactive in our bodies first, I would say almost always, and we don't even realize it until we're spiraling. So the more we're present in our bodies, the more we can be present to when we're feeling our nervous system feel unbalanced or stressed. And we want to try to keep it balanced as best as we can, even as we hear things that might be upsetting. There's pretty much nothing in this moment that's happening in Palestine that isn't upsetting. So I'm just going to take some deep breaths, and I invite you to join me in that.
Hello, Alex. Hi.
I just muted you, Jonathan, so we didn't hear that conversation. So I am so delighted and honored to have Jonathan Kuttab join me tonight in a conversation. If you were with us for High Holidays last year or saw on our website, Jonathan spoke to our community during the High Holidays last year before October 7th, and had some really wise words to say and a lot of challenging questions and comments for us, and it was fabulous. And then October 7th happened, and I immediately wanted to write a statement, but I knew that I did not want to write a statement that was only a Jewish statement. And so I immediately called or texted Jonathan and said, Jonathan, I want to write a statement together. Would you be willing? And Jonathan graciously said, yes, please. And so Jonathan Kuttab and Rabbi Esther Azar and I put together a statement that has over 7,000 signatures, and I still think it's one of the best statements out there. It captures both the horror of the moment and also contextualizes it in the horror of the past 75 plus years, and tries to hold this balance and tries to really hold our communities together, rather than let those who are trying to divide us conquer us, and to weave the fabric of our lives in our communities in wholeness, so that we can get to a place of peace. So that statement's on our website, and you can still find it there if you haven't read it. Jonathan is a Palestinian Christian theologian and human rights lawyer. and he splits his time between, is it Philadelphia, I believe, and Palestine. And he's been doing this work for his whole life. And what happened was I called Jonathan at some point recently and I said, can we have a conversation again for our community? And we jumped on a call and we had a really rich conversation. And so we're going to pick up from there. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Jonathan some questions. We'll engage in some dialogue. We'll do that for about 45 minutes or so, maybe. We'll be together for about an hour and a half. And then we'll open it up for your questions. And we'll probably do that in chat because we find that to be more efficient, but we'll see how we're doing. So I just want to thank you all for being here. I know a lot of you wrote messages when you signed up of how grateful you are to have this opportunity. And so we are as well. We're so grateful to be able to offer it. So Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining me and being in community with us at Beit Tikkun in the Network of Spiritual Progressives. I'm really grateful. So the first thing I really want us to talk about, we did talk about this on the call, was about theology. How do we find divine source, divine love, divine energy in this historical moment? And, you're a Christian theologian, I'm a Jewish theologian. We come from, obviously from the same roots. And I think we actually even have this, I think our theologies overlap so much, but I'd love to hear some of your reflections.
Well, I'm not a theologian.
Well, we have wonderful theologian conversations.
I do take my faith seriously, yes. And I am associated with FOSNA, associated with Sabil, which is Palestinian Liberation Theology. And so in that sense, yes, I dabble in theology occasionally. But Naim Atik, who is a theologian, once told me that in the Psalms, there are two kinds of Psalms. There are Psalms of lament, where people are saying, where are you, God? How long? How long? The evil seem to be thriving everywhere, and you don't seem to be listening. You don't seem to be present. We are suffering. We are in crisis. Where are you, God?
Yeah.
And then there are other Psalms which are more almost celebratory, saying truth will prevail, justice will prevail, God is sovereign, things will change, don't be fooled by the outward appearances, evil will disappear. It may look very strong at the moment, but God is still in charge, and God is still in control, and our faith is in Him. So that's the theological part. Of course, it's much, much easier said than actually practiced.
Right.
During the Holocaust, many people lost their faith, stopped believing in God altogether. And right now, many, especially young people, are giving up on the church, particularly because of its complicity and its silence and its inadequate response to what's going on. It's interesting, if we had a Muslim theologian here with us, Muslims seem to have a much better ability to live with that. The one word you hear all the time from all Muslim Palestinians is, I'm suffering, my mother died, and our house was destroyed. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah is like, praise be to God, or we praise Him. And I've always found that a little really touching and even a little bit jarring, that you praise God and you thank God, even in the midst of unfathomable suffering and loss, and you say, praise God, we Alhamdulillah. Listen to it sometime. If you have any conversation with a Palestinian, and especially if he's talking about his own suffering, his own loss, that word, alhamdulillah, will come up.
Right. Right. Yeah, I have heard that, and I find it's jarring and beautiful also. How do we hold in the face of this horror gratitude and
Yeah.
appreciation? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of us are struggling with that very question. How do we embrace gratitude and appreciation in the face of this nightmare that we're watching unfold, that we feel powerless to affect change? And one of the things that I turn to in the Jewish tradition is this psalm, actually, that talks about the fact that even though it looks like the evil are flourishing and they're all over the place and don't worry, this too shall pass. And I imagine in the Holocaust that was something that people really held on to. And if we're going to turn to like talking about a theology that arose out of the Holocaust, right? A theology of we have to be powerful. There is no God. It's only us that we can turn to for our security and safety. Then we land here, right? We land here in this moment.
It's worse than a bad theology. It also says that, if you pardon me saying it, and I have to say it with great care, that Hitler was right. That it's blood and iron and guts and steel. That's what counts. Nothing else counts. Humanity doesn't count. Morality doesn't count. It's the powerful who has power. This type of thinking, yeah, I hear that in Israel a lot,
Yeah.
especially in Israel. People are they're intoxicated partly with their empowerment after millennia of centuries of powerlessness. They now have power, and they do not hesitate to use it and even celebrate it. What people in the United States, which is why I think there's such a big chasm between many Israeli Jews and many U.S. Jews, is that American Jews have not given up on their morality and their values the way many Israeli Jews have, where they feel their power makes their actions even moral. To kill babies is moral. To rape prisoners is moral, because we have to show them we are exercising empowerment, which has been denied to us for centuries, and now is our time, and we have to use it, and nobody has the right to tell us otherwise. Now, I think anybody, especially in Israel, who is Jewish, who still has conscience and morality, would not accept that. Would not accept that. And I feel for my Jewish Israeli friends who are really in a crisis. And I think many American Jews are also feeling the sense of crisis and moral
Yeah.
uncertainty and discomfort. On the one hand, they want to exercise empowerment. Empowerment is a good thing, and solidarity with one's group and with one's tribe is almost ingrained in most of us. On the Palestinian side also, the sense of tribal solidarity, our people. And yet, these ideologies and these identities have really failed us.
Yeah.
And they are now in such conflict that we need to start thinking out of the box, which is why, for me, it's almost imperative that I, maybe not most Palestinians don't feel that way, but that I reach out and seek Jewish people, Israeli and American, to try and think together out of the box, and to try and think together, how can we achieve justice. And I love what you started out with. I don't know which Jewish author actually said it, that it's truth, justice, and peace. And in that order, somehow we need to work on getting the truth out, finding out the truth, being able to sift through the propaganda and the biases and the standard narrative, which everybody's invested in, and we have to break out of that. Part of that narrative is, of course, the demonization of the enemy, and particularly the demonization of Hamas and Gaza and people in Gaza, because that then allows or permits all the immoral things that follow. Because if Hamas is pure evil, then everything we do in fighting Hamas becomes legitimate.
Right.
And there are no innocents. And if there are, it's collateral damage.
Or it's Hamas's fault.
It's Hamas's fault anyway.
Right.
So maybe one of the first things that has to be done is to challenge the demonization of Hamas. Hamas is a political party. I don't like them. I don't like their theology. I don't like their ideology. But they're a political party. They're like the MAGA people in this country. I don't like them. I wouldn't vote for them. But I wouldn't demonize them to the point where I would kill them and kill anybody who's associated with them and kill anybody who's near them, and use my hatred of MAGA or Trumpism to just justify no longer a distinction between civilian and combatant, no longer a distinction between, no longer respect for human beings and humanity, no longer respect for somebody who surrenders. Take them prisoner and treat them nicely.
So let me jump in here, Jonathan, if I can, for a couple seconds.
Sure.
So I want to, the comment that you talked about, me talking about peace, truth, justice, and peace, was before other folks were on the call. So I just want to tell folks what that was. So those of you who've been to Torah study with me or have heard me speak, I've given off this teaching that's in the Pirkei Avot, that the world rests on three foundational pieces. And I will tell you that in Pirkei Avot, there's different rabbis who say different things that are the foundation. But the one that I'm uplifting is the three foundations of truth, justice, and peace. Now, it doesn't actually say in that order. That's me. As I have thought about this, I've thought, actually, it's in an order. So we can't have justice. We can't have liberation if we don't know what the truth is that we're working to create liberation for. And we can't have peace if we don't have justice and liberation. So they're all three required, but to me, they do matter what order we create them in. And so part of what I've been doing in our community is to bring truths that make us uncomfortable, or maybe don't make all of us uncomfortable, but nonetheless that uplift some truths. And so, Jonathan, you just spoke a truth that I can imagine for some people might be kind of difficult to digest, which is to not demonize Hamas. That Hamas is a political party, and Hamas also, of course, has a armed struggle aspect to their group. And so I'd like you to say a little bit more about that distinction, and how can you imagine Jews or anyone really holding and thinking about Hamas, for whom we've all been taught to demonize forever, right? That's just, Thursday we're starting a book group on Rashid Khalidi's book, 100 Years War on Palestine, and he talks about the demonization of Palestinians from the get-go, and the names, the ease with which we created a category of Palestinians being, in fact, terrorists. And it's always, just when you watch and read about who's being killed and how they're categorizing them, it's so clear. So I'd like you to tease out and talk a little bit more about this, not demonizing Hamas, because I can imagine that this could be a crunchy place, let's say, a difficult place for some
Okay.
folks.
From day one, literally on October 7, I realized what was going on,
Right.
particularly the stories about rape and beheading babies and burning babies in the oven and killing children in front of their parents. A whole number of stories which were not proven at all. I'm not saying there were no rapes. There may have been, but I still have not seen the evidence of it. I've heard allegations galore about rape and burning and beheading of children. But the point of these stories was to create this demonization, to say that this is so evil that anything to be done to destroy it is legitimate, not only legitimate, is necessary, is part of our moral duty. And to say that people in Gaza are not innocent because they allowed Hamas to exist, whether it's by voting for it or by failing to revolt against it. And then there are no innocents. And also, if you can say that Hamas is embedded somewhere in a hospital, in a school, in a mosque, then that becomes a legitimate target and you can go and destroy it. And anybody who's killed who is innocent, even though you don't accept their innocence, it's because Hamas put them in harm's way, because Hamas is using them as human shields, because Hamas is responsible anyway, because they're the ones who brought it about. They're the ones who started it on October 7th, as if there was nothing that happened before or after. So the truth is important, and sometimes it's hard for me to give that truth because I'm not a fan of Hamas. But I have to say this because the demonization of Hamas has been weaponized to allow for genocide, basically, and all sorts of brutalities. And then the other thing is about armed struggle. It just so happens I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in using violence at all. I don't think that the weapons, the gun or the knife or the bomb, is the solution to our problems. But I find myself having to, again and again, to say, wait a minute. Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. They have to do it ethically. They shouldn't target civilians, etc. They should follow the rules of war. But they have the right of armed resistance. I think they are foolish to exercise that right, particularly when they're dealing with an ultra militarized population, which is massively superior to them in weapons. But nevertheless, what happened on October 7, and this is very hard for people to hear, was largely a military operation where they breached the walls of the high-tech walls surrounding them in 40 different places simultaneously. They actually captured 2 army bases and took all their contents. They killed over 340 soldiers by Israeli estimates and captured 40 or 50 others to trade them in. And then the Israelis just had somehow the system collapsed. There was no protection. The borders were open and people could go in and out, and whether they are Hamas or other or civilians, and they just were an outraged mob that went around and killed, and they also attacked. I don't want to exonerate Hamas. They also attacked a music festival, which is a civilian site, and they attacked a number of kibbutzim, which are civilian targets, in my view, even though they are placed there to play a military role. So it's funny that people think that Israel has the right to defend itself, and Israelis have every right to pick up weapons and to train and to spend their money on all sorts of weapons. But somehow they think that Palestinians and Hamas don't have the right to arm themselves. They don't have the right to defend themselves. they don't have the right to weapons. It bothers me. I wish that both sides would realize that violence is not the answer.
Right.
That military power has severe limitations and usually gets you deeper into the mess rather than rescue you from your mess. That violence is not the way to liberation or to security. But we can't have that as a one-sided thing, demanding that Palestinians refrain from armed struggle, and any use of armed struggle, even against military targets, is terrorism, but Israeli actions are legitimate self-defense.
Right. You know, I'm thinking about the fact that if they both could let go of this militarization, attacks on each other, there would be a different path forward, right? We could start to walk a different path forward. But both peoples, or some of both peoples, I guess I'll say, are really attached to believing that the only way to safety is through our violence, is through our military might, and that's the.
I have to say that is a tempting view. That is the view of the majority of Christians in this country, for example, that weapons are necessary because there are evil people out there and you need weapons to defend yourself. And it's always been a very small minority among Christians, among Jews, among Muslims, among anybody who have said, no, violence doesn't work. Violence is not the answer. But it's so tempting. When you see evil taking place and you see somebody who's coming to murder your wife, your kids, you can sacrifice yourself, but your loved ones are in danger. The temptation is pick up the gun and shoot them. It's very understandable. It's also almost biological, a fight or flight. But to stand there without actually killing the other person is a very, very difficult position, I know.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about that as Israel has used its military might in such extreme ways, even before October 7th. I mean, we know that the confiscation of land in the West Bank had been increasing significantly in the last 2 years. And the oppression of Gazans and the stranglehold on Gaza. And at some point, it's like a boiling point. And people are going to explode because they don't know what else to do. I mean, I think about, I was in Israel, Palestine in 2018 when there was the March for the Right of Return, a nonviolent march to the fence to make a statement and claim a right of return. And Israel responded with massive gun power and shooting and maiming intentionally people. And I was standing there when tear gas was being shot off. And it was so strong that we ended up getting, having the effects of tear gas on us. So we had to leave, and we were on the Israeli side. And then these invasions into refugee camps in the West Bank. What do we, I don't know what we expect people to do when this happens, decade after decade after decade. And with it, on top of it, this incredible oppression and dehumanization of Palestinians. And yet I'm with you, like I'm completely a pacifist. I don't ever want violence to be the solution. I think it results in this. It results in exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah, I want to say that violence is not only weapons. I mean, when Palestinians think of Israeli violence, they don't think of the gun. They think of the bulldozer. It's the bulldozer that does the violence.
That's a really good point.
They think of the checkpoints.
Right.
Somebody says, but if you do use violence, if you do use armed struggle, there are rules. You must make a distinction between a military and a civilian target. You must even a combatant and a non-combatant, a soldier who is wounded. You can't shoot them. You have to give them first aid, and it's not permitted. Or a soldier who surrenders, somebody who waves the flag, even though he is a combatant and a legitimate target. Once he waves that white flag and drops his gun and raises his hand, it's a crime to kill him or to go against him. So yes, to murder civilians, Hamas does not have the right to murder civilians, whether they are pursuing peace or not. I don't want to go to the point of saying that those who are having a music festival 2 kilometers from basically a concentration camp were being really, really insensitive. I'm not going to go there, but at some level, the pressure cooker that was Gaza, once it exploded, there was a crazy mob that went out, and yes, they went after civilians, and yes, they committed crimes and atrocities, and I do not want to justify or exonerate them at all from that.
Okay, I'm gonna change us a little bit off of this this discussion about demonization of Hamas, and we can always return to it. I'm sure there'll be questions. And I want to turn now to one of the conversations we touched upon when we spoke, which is about normalization and the pitfalls of dialogue. So I would like you to give a definition of normalization.
Okay.
Your personal definition, but also like the critique of normalization, that so that everyone on the call understands what we're talking about first as a baseline. And then for folks on the call, we did send out a link to an article Jonathan wrote called The Pitfalls of Dialogue, and it has the pitfalls and it also has some of the possibilities. And so you all should have received that link. So that's where I'm turning this conversation now, so that, because one of the things that have come up in some of these calls that we've been hosting is other people have raised questions about, and I have shared those questions that have been raised about some of the challenges about some of these organizations that are Palestinian Israeli organizations, usually within 48, but not necessarily. There's some also in the occupied territories. And particularly since October 7th, but I've heard this before from Palestinians, the incredible limitations of those groups and the challenges of them. And so I'd like you to address this big topic. Thank you.
The only reason this is very, very important is because on the Zionist side, there has been an industry of peacemaking that is very superficial.
Jonathan, can you do me one favor? Can you define what you mean by Zionism? Because people have asked that question a lot. I mean, I talk about political Zionism, but
I know, and I've read, and I know there are different kinds of Zionism. There's cultural and religious, and there are some forms of Zionism that appear to be very benign. But the form that has prevailed in Israel over all the others is not the Ahad Am and Martin Buber, who you only hear about in Israel when this issue comes up, only. Other than that, they have no influence. But you see, the mainstream established form of Zionism has so utilized and weaponized the language of peace that they gave peace a bad name. In Israel, every word is shalom. Good morning is shalom, good evening is shalom. Hello is shalom, goodbye is shalom. It's shalom, shalom, shalom. You invade Lebanon, you call it Shalom HaGalil, the peace of the Galilee. The word shalom has been stripped of its value. And the word cooperation and coexistence have also been stripped of their value. They become an empty exercise where the oppressor can just blow, feel good and assuage their conscience. They've done something. They've met with a Palestinian. They had a wonderful time. They ate tabbouleh together and they sang Kumbaya, one verse in Arabic and one verse in Hebrew. And it was all nice and lovely. And then they go back to do their military service, and she or he goes back to the refugee camps because they're under curfew anyway. The kind of working for peace that doesn't deal with the roots of the problem. There are so many organizations that do that, and so much money. I understood in Germany there's about 400 societies that are dedicated to Jewish-Arab reconciliation. But they don't want to talk about land confiscation. They don't want to talk about self-determination. They certainly don't want to talk about the right of return for Palestinians. For them, it's just a question of let's fight those negative stereotypes. And yes, there are negative stereotypes that need to be fought. And let's have good human relationships. Let's hug and sing together. But they don't deal with the real issues. And more often than not, to enter those cycles, you are requested to accept a number of propositions. Otherwise, it's not allowed. This is what's called normalization. Normalization is when you are asked to accept as legitimate some of the concepts of the oppressor system or oppressive society. So you don't talk about right of return because that would mess up the demography. There's nothing to talk about. In the past, it used to be you don't talk about the PLO. Now it's okay. Now you don't talk about Hamas. And you don't talk about armed struggle, for sure. And you don't challenge Israel's militarization, because obviously we have to defend ourselves. So you start with either the assumptions of the oppressor society, or you start with the reality that it exists today as a proper place from which to talk. So where do we want to go from here? Well,
it's the floor, right? It's
the floor. It's where you start with.
Mm-hmm.
And if your ceiling is too high, well, then you're closing off a discussion. You really don't want peace. If you're talking about, it used to be one state solution. If you talk about one state solution, it means you want to destroy Israel. It means you don't accept a Jewish state. It means you want to kill us. It means you're almost the same as Hitler. So there's no dialogue. So to enter into dialogue, you are required to make a number of concessions to begin with. And dialogue is based on the assumptions of the powerful, the dominant society. So then many Palestinians say, I don't want dialogue. I don't want to talk about peace. I don't want to talk about coexistence. If you want to talk to me about co-resistance, not coexistence. I don't want to coexist with you the way you are now. Doesn't mean I want to kill you. Doesn't mean I want to destroy you. It means I want to destroy this system of oppression that you represent and that you are so comfortable with. So the question is not, again, you take the slogan, from the river to the sea. We're talking about one state. That doesn't mean it's free of Jews. It means it's free of oppression. It's free of Jewish supremacy. It's free of domination. It's free of discrimination. But you can live there as equals. You can live there with dignity. You can live there with mutual understanding, but not based on a system that by its very nature oppresses me.
So when you
go ahead.
I was going to say was what I've been thinking, when I've been hearing this co-resistance phrase, which I've been hearing a lot lately, is I've been thinking co-resistance will get us to coexistence.
Yes.
Like it's kind of like the truth, justice, and peace. Like you have to have partners who are willing to stand up and say, no, what's happening is not okay. We need to understand the truth of the history of how we came to be here, and we need to co-resist both the facts on the ground, but also the truth, the historical truths that we've been told, so that then we can start to move toward a real coexistence.
Correct, correct. It's like that. There was a cartoon about this Israeli soldier in Gaza blowing up houses and killing people. It says, hurry up, I have a demonstration in Tel Aviv to go to. I want to demonstrate. This kind of I don't want you and your demonstration. if this is what it means, if you are participating in a genocide, to tell me you have a day off from your military service that you want to spend learning more about Arab culture and meeting Arabs, most Palestinians will say, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. So this is unfortunately, very much unfortunately, this has become an obstacle. We desperately need joint action by Jews and Arabs, Palestinians and Israelis against oppression. But right now it's very difficult. It's physically difficult. Palestinians aren't allowed to travel to Jerusalem or Haifa or Tel Aviv or whatever. They need a permit. And Jewish Israelis are told you're not allowed to go into the Palestinian areas, the territories. Unless you're a settler, you can do whatever you want. For them, this is all Israel. But the system prohibits joint activity as much as possible. I think joint activity is absolutely, desperately needed. And I'm sorry that there is this false peace activity that makes it difficult for most Palestinians to join.
So what kinds of joint activity, you just said it's so critical, what are some kinds that exist or that you imagine you wish existed that would actually get us to where there is coexistence? For example, standing together, which my understanding doesn't actually support the right of return, and is also had been doing work to make sure that food was getting into Gaza, to block the settlers from destroying the food trucks that were going into Gaza. So is that an example, even though they don't allow the right of return? I mean, how do we hold this? And it's complicated, and I'm really curious about this.
That's a very, very small example, but I'll let you in on a little secret. When Israeli Jews put themselves on the line, and stand in front of the bulldozers, or stand in front of, or go through resistance, most Palestinians don't ask them, wait a minute, do you support the PLO? Wait a minute, do you support the right of return? Wait a minute, are you willing to denounce? No, the fact that you are there doing something is what is important, because you're showing that you really believe in the cause. Now, if you are just sitting somewhere in New York or in Los Angeles and having some wine and cheese, and then you want, then we can get into all these questions. What do you really believe in? Are you really sincere about self-determination? Well, do Palestinians, Mayor Kahane used to ask Israelis this question: do Palestinians have the right to become a majority? Do Arabs have the right to become a majority in Israel? And if you say no, you're like me, you're a Kahanist. If you say yes, then you're not a Zionist anymore. You're allowing them to become a majority. And so that kind of contrast between what you really believe in and what you're willing to do to arrive at it is very important. Right now, as I said, we need to start thinking out of the box. We really need to have people from both sides who are convinced that we need genuine peace, not fake peace. That we need to talk about Palestinian self-determination and Palestinian rights. That the old ideologies don't work anymore. The two-state solution doesn't work anymore. because it's been totally gutted of its value by the settlement movement and by the facts on the ground that the settlers have created. So right now, we need new thinking, and that thinking has to be joint between Jews and Arabs living in the land. And that thinking will have to deviate from the standard ideologies of both Palestinian nationalism and of traditional Zionism. So you need to have a new Zionism that accepts and embraces Palestinians as equals. And we need to have a new Palestinian nationalism that accepts and embraces Jewish Israelis as equal and as people who live and love this land as much as we do.
So why don't you speak a little bit about your one-state solution vision?
Okay.
And how we start to build that, and then we'll open it up.
I wrote a little book. We should probably put the citation to it in the chat box. You can download a free copy. It's called Beyond the Two-State Solution, in which I try to map out a vision of a single state in all the land that belongs both to Palestinian Arabs and to Israeli Jews. A state that provides a lot of the advantages that Zionism promises to provide, but also a lot of the advantages that Palestinian nationalism promises to provide. But it doesn't provide exclusivity. It doesn't say, as 92 members of the Knesset recently said, that only Jews have the right to self-determination in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel. That the nation-state laws, that says this is only for Jews. Arabs or non-Jews will be tolerated as long as they are nice and polite and quiet and accept and know that this is not their home, this is ours. Then they are tolerated, as long as there are not too many of them either. So they have to be careful on demography. Instead, I say no. This land belongs to us, and it can belong to you as well, but not on the basis of exclusivity. State land or public land or land which is not fully private belongs to all of us and should probably be given priority to those whose land was taken and whose homes were taken from them. So rather than force them off of the land or the homes that they are in, you just give them other land from public land. So Jews believe strongly in the right of return, fine. But then so do Palestinians. If Jews can claim the right to return after 2,000 years, but surely Palestinians who still within living memory know that they were living there probably can point out their homes if they have not been totally destroyed, and who probably have lands and papers for them, whatever. Palestinians have the right to return and live in equality with the Jews who are there.
So what I'm hearing you say is that in your vision, and my experience with Palestinians is this is not unusual at all, that Israeli Jews, when we talk about one state, if you will, from the river to the sea, a lot of Jews freak out, right? And they get very scared and their trauma buttons get kicked, and they think that means Jews are going to be slaughtered or sent out of the land or somehow ethnically cleansed or genocided. And I've actually never heard that from a Palestinian. But our trauma centers get really kicked up. And what I'm hearing you say really clearly is when you talk about one state solution, it's for everyone who's on that land.
Exactly.
And it provides the possibility for people who are not on that land, but might want to come to that land, Jews or Palestinians, to find a way to do so. Correct. And to be able to occupy or live on that land.
It's very interesting what views we attribute to other people. You talk about the trauma. There's one phrase that was always bothering me because I keep hearing it. Idbahul Yahud, butcher the Jews, kill the Jews. I hear it from Israelis and American Jews all the time. I've never heard a single Palestinian Arab say it. It's not part of our language. We don't use that language. We don't say it. But every Jew would know, Idbah al-Yahud. That's what they keep saying. We don't say it. But Mavet al-Arabim, I've seen and heard death to the Arabs, and I've seen it graffitied on Arab homes and Arab places all over the place, and I've heard it shouted at demonstrations. I haven't heard Idbah al-Yahud at any demonstration. So yeah, we have to start with reality. And I don't want to deny that most Palestinians right now, if you ask them, would rather not have the Israelis in their land. But they know that that cannot be accomplished, and they have to accommodate themselves. The whole Oslo process, peace process, was an act whereby the PLO and Yasser Arafat and the majority of Palestinians said, we are willing to come to terms with this new reality. We are willing to accept that Israelis live in this land and that Israeli Jews live in this land. And we're willing to live with them. In fact, we're willing to limit ourselves to 22% of Palestine, but you have to give it to us. You can't just have settlements all over it and start slowly annexing it. But when that happens and we have to go back and say, all of Palestine belongs to me, Palestine Arabiya, but then I have to say, yes, but there's 7 million Jews living there. And they love it, and it's their land as well.
So I really want to uplift the last thing that you just said, and I really want everyone to hear this clearly, is that there are 7 million Jews living on that land, and they love it too, and it's their land too.
The last part gets stuck in my throat.
Yeah. Right.
The last phrase gets stuck in my throat.
Thank you for that honesty. Yeah.
It is, because I prefer the term that says land belongs to God. Al-mulk lillah.
Me too.
It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God.
Right.
And you're living there. And what can I do? Yes, you took it from me by force, but what can I do? I'm willing to live with you.
Yeah. I guess at this point, there's no option, right?
There is no option. There is no option.
Yeah.
Neither side can fully destroy the other. Although many Israelis think they can, and I think they're totally mistaken if they think they can destroy the Palestinian people.
So I'm glancing at all your comments. Thank you all so much. I'm glancing as Jonathan's speaking, and I'm doing my best to bring some of them to light. So I'm going to try to do a little bit more of that now. So since the trauma and the horror of October 7th, on both sides, right? Like, and I'm not trying to at all equate what happened in those since October 7th with October 7th, but there's an incredible amount of trauma and anger and fear. How do we navigate that going forward? The fear, of course, I think some people are saying we cannot, now we've lost the one state solution. There's no way we can live together now, forget it, because there's so much rage. And also there's Palestinians have been oppressed for so long. We're afraid that they're going to rise up and kill us. And
yeah,
where do we start? Darwin said, a good place to start would be for Israeli Jews to say, we're really sorry.
Well, I used to think a lot about that. And I used to think that somehow the Israeli trauma on October 7 was compounded by their memories of the Holocaust, by the fear, the failure of the state. The state failed, its technology failed, its walls failed, its army failed, There was nobody. You call 911 and nobody answers. You go to a nearby army camp and it's not there. You had to call your friends in Haifa and Tel Aviv to please get some guns and come and take me. I'm hiding in a basement. That's the trauma. And somebody also told me there's the trauma of Khurban Habayit, that this is the third time when Jews will lose everything. So there's a huge trauma and it needs healing. And for a long time, I was thinking about how does one heal trauma? And I read books on it and I consulted with experts because I know that until your people are healed of that trauma, I'm going to be suffering because they're going to take it all out on me and my people. And then somebody told me something that really, really hit me. You can't heal somebody from their trauma if they don't want to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
That you can have the most sophisticated program for trauma healing, but if somebody doesn't want to be healed, if somebody is, I don't want to use the word reveling in their trauma, it's just like an addicted person. Until they make the decision that they want to kick the habit, yes, they will need help still, professional help, and it won't be easy, but it has to start with wanting to be healed from that trauma. And I find many Israelis do not want to be healed from that trauma. They love it. They want it. They revel in it. They promote it, which is why, by the way, the demonization of Hamas becomes a very important part of it. Is because the demonization of Hamas means it's not my problem. It's not my trauma. It's just that there's some evil people there. I have to destroy them. So a lot of work needs to be done. But first of all, they will need to want to be healed of that trauma. And I fear for my people. I mean, if I was in Gaza and I went through what they went through, I don't know. It's going to take a lot to heal from that trauma, and faith does play a part. You know, this alhamdulillah, this feeling that somehow ultimately, you know, justice will prevail. That is probably a very important part of the healing. But we're still talking several steps into the future. Maybe it's good. It's good to think about the future. But right now we have an immediate task. Yeah. We have an ongoing genocide. We have somebody with their knee on my neck. It has to be lifted. And I can't breathe because I'm not allowed water. I'm not allowed food. I'm not allowed hospitals. I'm not allowed education. The school you're supposed to start, there are no schools. I don't have shelter. My homes are being systematically destroyed. All the universities have been destroyed. All of them. Most of the hospitals are either destroyed or totally inoperational. Never mind the economy. Never mind the fields. Never mind the livelihood.
The whole destruction.
And right now they are talking about making that food or the supplies of food sort of conditional. Wait, when there's a ceasefire, then we will determine who distributes it and who gets it and who doesn't get it. And you know, we really need to address these issues. And then we can start talking about, all right, how do we live with these people in the future?
Okay, so we're in most of us in the United States or Europe. And what you just said was like crucial. It's why I'm on the streets a lot. It's why I'm writing letters. It's all why a lot of us are involved in trying to change this nightmare. And right now we don't have the political power. We just don't. We have millions of people, the vast majority of people in the United States, Democrats want this thing to end. Biden seems to just bat his eyes and pretend he has no power. Where would you want us to apply pressure? Where do you think the pressure point is that maybe if we applied that pressure right there, maybe it would start to crack this hold.
Who is we?
All of us, us here on this call, us who are trying to stop.
Because there is no question that the United States government right now is part of the problem.
Right.
It can easily be part of the solution, very easily. I mean, Israel ran out of ammunition the first 3 weeks. They bomb with everything. Yeah, they were out of ammunition. And Biden says, don't worry about it. I'll send you more. I'll send you more and more and more and more. The international community was saying, stop. And Biden says, don't worry about it. We'll use the veto. And the crimes that were being brought by the ICJ and the ICC, and the United States, don't worry, we'll put pressure on the judges and on the courts. We will insulate you from international law and international public opinion. Wait a minute, the Arab countries, don't worry, we will pressure the Arab countries to make sure they do nothing. So the United States is definitely part of the problem. So we are here in the belly of the beast.
Right.
And we have our work cut out for us. The only thing that I want to say is we are not alone. And we should not despair. Maybe we should find ways in which we can use our power a little bit more effectively and a little more intelligently. But in the end, we do have power. We do have power because we have legitimacy and right and the laws, including US laws, on our side. Now, there are very powerful people on the other side who don't care, who have money and who can buy politicians and who can pressure universities and who can silence students and who can kick students out. Right now, the student movement is a wonderful thing, but you see how much power is being used against it all over the place. BDS movement can have a lot of power, but you see they are even making laws against the BDS. They are willing to violate US Constitution, US rights, US freedoms. In fact, I would go one step further. The Democrats are even willing to lose the next election rather than say, no, stop this. I think if it's not at all certain that Kamala Harris is going to win. We may end up with Trump. And if we do, don't blame the Palestinians and don't blame the young people and don't blame the progressives. Blame Kamala and the Democrats. They have every ability to exercise power and they choose not to. In fact, they choose to double down and allow these things to happen. What happened at the DNC was absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. People were willing to give Kamala the benefit of the doubt, to sort of expect her to just say something, do something. And she chose not to, which I understand. But she will be to blame if she loses to Trump. It is she and the Democratic Party who are to blame, not us. Don't let anybody guilt you into thinking it's your role to, again, lie down and give up your principles and your rights because Trump is so awful. It's the same as telling the Palestinians, you know, what do you want? Do you want Netanyahu and Ben Gvir or do you want Gantz? I don't want Gantz. Why do I have to? I mean, assuming I had the vote, and I don't. But if I had the vote, why would I vote for Gantz? Why would I vote for somebody who's actually committing genocide against me, just so that I don't get Ben Gvir and Smotrich?
So how do we leverage? I think this is a question that all groups that are fighting against this genocide and wanting an end to it. I mean, I know JVP is having these conversations. I know If Not Now having these conversations. I mean, they're all over. What do we do? How do we either push Biden more, or if Kamala wins, how do we push her it seems so intractable. It's just shocking and horrifying that this has been going on for what, 11 months, almost, yeah, 11 months. And millions of us wanted to end. The majority of us wanted to end. And not only is it not ending, but the numbers and the escalation is shocking.
Yeah.
Maybe not shocking, but horrifying. Right?
It's
The numbers that are being killed every day now are almost more than they were 11 months ago.
And it's moving to the West Bank now. There's talk about the West Bank.
Right. And now they're creating ethnic cleansing and slaughters. I mean, what I'm reading is they're pulling the same exact playbook that they did in Gaza.
And they're saying it. They're saying it. We're going to make this like Gaza. Well, my answer is twofold. Part of it is theological and part of it is historical. Theologically, I think you know the answer. We are not sovereign. We are only responsible for ourselves and our own behavior. And we have to believe and trust God for the ultimate outcome. It's not for us to do it. I'll tell you a little personal thing. I used to think it was my job to liberate Palestine when I was younger. Mm. And there was one point, I forgot when I suddenly realized that's not my job. My job is to be faithful, to have integrity, to speak truth, to do what I can, to resist, and to remain nonviolent. And it's not my job what ultimately happens. That I have to trust God for that. That's the theological part of the answer. But there's also a historical part. And the historical part is actually very encouraging. In fact, if you take the longer view, the Zionist movement has failed. Has failed. And what is it, 100 years? 75 years for the state, or 100 years for the Zionist movement? It has failed. The Palestinian people have not disappeared. In fact, if anything, young people today are much more clear about their Palestinian identity than their parents and grandparents. And the idea of setting up a Jewish state has failed. Here it is, with every possible advantage on its side, with full control over all the territory, and with a military that can project its power throughout the whole area, with complete control, and they failed. I mentioned 7 million Jews are living in the land. Also 7 million Arabs are living in the land. And they're going nowhere. And I know there are some Israelis who think maybe they can push 1 million or 2 into the Sinai Peninsula and another 1 million into Jordan. And in fact, that they openly talked about it. And they may still try, but I don't think they will succeed. So what do? I have to remind you, and we have to remind ourselves, 100 years ago, women in this country did not have the vote. In this country. That's just 100 years ago. 120 years ago, African Americans in this country were not even considered human. They were chattel. They get sold and bought. And you heard about the woman who was escaping from the South, the slave woman with her baby girl, and she was surrounded in a house, and she had to throw her baby out of the window to kill her so she wouldn't have to grow up in slavery. Well, when they took her back to Georgia, they couldn't try her for murder. They had to try her for destruction of property. Because to try her for murder would be to acknowledge that her baby was a human being. That was slavery. And that was only like a little over a century ago. So if you take the historical view, there is room for hope. We don't give up. Yes, we are right in the midst of it, and it is horrible and horrifying. And I think we should just concentrate on doing what we think is right, what we think is moral. And here's where I think a theological discussion is required, maybe without my presence, just between you and your congregation and your community. What does it mean to be Jewish today? What does it mean to be a chosen people? Are you a chosen people? Are you any different, any special, anything from other groups? These are very serious issues, very serious questions to be asked. I know for me as a Palestinian, I have to ask myself, what is it that I believe in? What is it that I stand for? What is this Palestinian nationalism? What does it do for me? What does it help me? Is it good? Is it a good thing? Is it something worth dying for? And I have to ask myself these questions. You know, is this Palestine Arabiya? Is this my land? Or what does it mean to belong to this land? You know, Elias Shakur wrote a book, We Belong to the Land, not the land belongs to us. We belong to the land. So what does it mean to belong to this land? What flows from that? What requirements come from that? And in the end, it's a very personal question, but it's also a collective, communal question. As a community, are we a community? What do we believe in? What do we stand for? Do we allow our enemies to determine for us who we are and to define us who we are? That's why, you know, the Zionist movement in the early days, they wrestled with these issues because a lot of anti-Semites were willing to support Zionism. You don't belong in France or Germany or whatever. You belong somewhere else. You go there. You're not part of German society.
Well, it was started by Christian Zionists. So
yes, absolutely.
There was
absolutely.
Inherently an anti-Semitic movement.
It was. And it was, Jews don't belong in this country. They are not our equal. They are a nation apart. Let them go somewhere else and be somebody else's problem. So you need to ask yourself now, who are we and what do we stand for and what do we believe in? Because these questions become very difficult now that you are super empowered. I mean, the Zionist movement and the state of Israel really super empowered the Jewish people. And they speak in the name of the Jewish people.
Yeah,
which makes it so difficult. The cultural minister, whatever, she says, I want Gaza's children 80 years from now to remember what the Jews did. She's proud of what she's doing in Gaza, and she wants the people of Gaza to remember 2 or 3 generations from now what the Jews did to them. Not what the Israelis did, not what the Zionists did, what the Jews did to them. So I know many Palestinians try to keep that distinction between Jewish and Zionist, Jewish and Israeli. But in Israel, the soldiers don't do that. They don't ask you, are you Zionist or are you Jewish? That's the question that you get asked at the airport, at the checkpoint, by the soldiers, by the settlers. They want to know, are you Jewish or not? Because that's the criteria for, are you part of our tribe? Are you to be empowered or are you to be suppressed and oppressed?
And I want to uplift what you just said about that, because a lot of people, and I'm not speaking for everyone on this call, but I've heard a lot of people get uncomfortable when people, and it's all over the press now because now Zionism is a protected class on many campuses.
Ah, yes.
So there's a lot of discomfort that people have when people use the term Zionism, like they're Zionists. And they, because of this equation, this equalization of conflation of Zionism as Jewish, as if it equals being Jewish. And that makes people, then when people criticize Zionism, then people feel like their Jewishness is being criticized. And I think it's really important for us as Jews to really be clear of this distinction between being Jewish, which is a religious practice, a religious experience, it can be cultural as well, and being Zionist, which is a political, the way I like to think about it anyway, is a political project to create a nation state in a land in which other people lived. And then we can start to criticize and critique and ask ourselves, what do we do with that? Maybe that wasn't the greatest idea. Maybe it was understandable in 48. And that doesn't mean that every Jew who came to Israel over time were thinking they were going to take land away from Palestinians or even wanted to take land away from Palestinians. They wanted to go live there. They needed safety and security. But I think it's really important for us when we hear the term and critique of Zionism to really remind ourselves that this is not a critique of Judaism. It's a critique of a Jewish supremacist state that is founded on the principles and ideology of an oppression of the people who live there. And so I'm just saying that so all of us can hold that in our hearts, because it's really hard. And the more that they get equated, the more that Zionism or Israel gets equated with Jews and Judaism, the more we're going to face anti-Semitism around the world.
Yeah. The problem is, for me, is that I like to make that distinction, but people living there don't have that luxury. The state is forcing them every day, down to the kind of license plates you have on your car, down to what's on your ID, down to what road you're allowed to travel on. It is an apartheid regime. The fact that it wasn't always practicing genocide, but sort of does that when we resist, then they practice genocide. But if we're quiet, if we go away, if we die, it's not sadistic. They don't want to kill us. They'd rather we didn't exist. We are invisible to them, or they want us to be invisible to them. And to the extent that we are visible, that we are this nefarious, evil thing, terrorists. I just heard a report today about some Israeli soldiers were making fun of Muslims praying, and they were saying, Allahu Akbar, and got shot by other Israeli soldiers who thought they were Muslims praying in Gaza.
Wow.
Because in their mind, they're Muslims. Islam is, Muslims and Arabs and terrorists, and it's all the same. And they're the evil ones, and we are the righteous ones. We are the good guys. Maybe we should allow people to ask questions if they want to.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've been reading the chat and asking some of the questions I've been asking, been coming from there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But if somebody wants to unmute, raise your hand, you can do so. And I just want to give a caveat. There's too many things in chat, so I couldn't ask everybody's question. But I just want to give a caveat to really what happens a lot when we open it up for questioning is that people make long statements and don't get to the question. And so I will interrupt because we don't have a lot of time and we want to give as many questions as possible. So I want to ask you to please really hone in on the essence of the question you have and trust that your analysis is valid and we care about it. And right now, what we want is to have a space for questions. So thank you so much. So I'm just going to go as I see your hand. So Shlomo, hello.
Hey. I just would like to say that I agree with everything that was said here. I agree especially with Jonathan Kuttab. And I have too much to say, so I will not. I would just mention something, but there is something that is really bothering me for many years. It's the chosen people thing. And there was a writer named Yosef Chaim Brenner in the beginning of the 20th century, actually the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. And he wrote in Hebrew already And he wrote that this chosen people thing in the prayer every day should be erased from the prayer book completely. And I cannot agree with him more. I think that's the essence of the anti-Semitism too. There is a famous telegram, not for you, but
Shlomo,
Mhm.
can you ask a question
done,
if you have
done,
one, please?
done.
Thank you. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just really trying to hone us in so that people have time for their questions. So
Okay.
thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Evelyn.
Hi, Jonathan.
There you are.
Where do we move from here in a realistic way that's going to be really effective in terms of if we do share your vision? How do we mobilize? What are your thoughts about that, please?
Well, it depends on what you call effective. I think we have too much of an obsession in over effectiveness. In the short term, I can't see how any of us are effective. But there are tasks along the path towards effectiveness or towards justice. One of them is to speak truth, to really challenge the ongoing narrative, which is not easy to do. Because the minute you deviate from the narrative, you get immediately attacked, personally attacked. If you talk about October 7th without not only denouncing what Hamas did, but calling it barbaric, that was a required adjective. My brother, who's a journalist, was writing an op-ed for the LA Times. And I said, but you didn't condemn Hamas. He said, oh, yes, I did. Here it is. Ah, yeah, but you didn't call it barbaric. You have to use the language that is imposed on you. So to break through the narrative, to speak the truth is not easy, and it's one place to start. To humanize the Palestinians, to insist that they are people, not just numbers. To insist that the State Department, the politicians who are so outraged and so caring about the hostages also care about the Palestinian prisoners who are being raped, who are photographed being raped, and they're getting away with it, who are openly being brutalized, denied food, and they come out after a few months having lost 30 or 40 pounds. You see how they come out of captivity, thoroughly traumatized. And Ben Gvir, who is now the Minister of Police, is openly proud that I'm taking away those privileges. I really want to kill every one of them, but they won't allow us. 27 of them have been killed in prison, who have been taken from their homes, fully healthy, and then they died. 27. Yeah, talk about Palestinian prisoners, not just hostages. That's another thing we can do. And then we can challenge our government for what it's doing, particularly challenge the Democratic Party. What they're doing is absolutely horrible. So there are many things that we can do. We can challenge, I can challenge, and I do challenge the churches. You may need to challenge your synagogues and your relatives. And it's horrible, and it's not easy. I know many of my friends in JVP, it's been traumatic for them on the personal family level. They can't talk about these things with their family. So you want to change the situation over there if you can't even talk about it in your own family? So talk about being effective. There are certain levels of effectiveness. And maybe this is, each of us has to have their own battle. And yes, we do need to talk to each other. And yes, we do need intersectionality. We need to join together, because by ourselves, we are too weak. You're right. There's very little we can do, but there's a lot we can do to challenge the ongoing.
Can I just say one thing before we continue? I just want to say, it sounds to me like it's a slow process. But it's a process.
You know what? It may be, but I have a feeling that in this situation, events get telescoped very, very quickly.
Yeah, you never
I
know.
mean, in 100 years, we've had about 1,000 years worth of history. What happens there from week to week, from month to month, from year to year, in other situations takes centuries to take place. I don't think it's going to take centuries here. I think it's going to happen very quickly. And when the top 1% decide it's no longer in their interest, you'll be surprised how quickly they will change.
I was going to say it more theologically. My theological view of the world, and we'll get to other questions in a second, is that when the way I think of God, as some of you know, is the transformative power of the universe, Yod He Vav He. When that force in the universe has some sense that we are really standing up and fighting for this world, whether it's on climate change or on Gaza or wherever, that somehow miracles happen. And we can never know what that kind of breaking, when the cries of the people are heard and the divine energy of the universe is unleashed, things can happen much more quickly than we expect. And I have to hold that hope, because this is such a horrific time. I don't know how to get through it without that hope, as you talked about, Jonathan. So, and yes, the 1% at some point will figure out a different way to make money, hopefully, than killing people. So there's a few more hands, Jonathan. Are you good if we stay a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Great. Adi, thank you.
Hi, I've read your book and I love it. And I'm wondering if there are ways we can amplify it or invite you to talk about it in other places. And for people who are doing the pitfall that you wrote about, like me, brainstorming solutions with groups of Palestinian and Israeli friends, like, is there a way to use that as a tool to help change people's minds?
Great question.
Yes, I think there is. And as I said, there are some Palestinians, and I'm certainly one of them, who is willing to speak. And I particularly, when I speak, I like to speak to other than the choir. So if you can get me an invitation to a synagogue other than Beit Tikkun,
We love having you.
if they are willing to hear me, I'm willing to speak.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Nancy.
I'll be quick. I have several levels of questions. First, you didn't mention AIPAC, and I was on a webinar yesterday with Ilan Pape, who talked a great deal about it. And second question, I just have had an ongoing frustration with the fact that we don't hear that Palestinians are Semites, so that what the Israelis are doing is incredibly anti-Semitic. And I just was given some information, but I don't know how to, if it's true that, in fact, there is a higher level of Hebraic DNA among all Palestinians than now in Israel. And I don't know if it's true, but that DNA tests are not allowed in Israel. Now, that could be false information. I don't know.
It's part of the whole conversation about what does it mean to be Jewish, and what does it mean to be children of Abraham. In the New Testament, Jesus, speaking as a Jewish rabbi, was very critical of those who says we are children of Abraham. This is nonsense. You're not children of Abraham. If anything, you're children not of the free woman, but of the slave woman, of Hagar. That's what Saint Paul says. So yeah. The whole genetic thing, when it comes to race, whether we're talking about Black people, white people, Jewish people, or others, is a very horrible tool of oppression. Yes, we need to move away from it.
Thank you. Maxine, hello.
Hi. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Maxine.
Hi. Yeah, I already put stuff in the chat, so I'll be very brief. Standing Together does a lot of stuff. They show up and they try to change the way the general public is thinking and so on. That means sometimes they have to moderate their language and not use the G word, for instance. But on the whole, they do a lot of good stuff, I think. And I'm wondering, do you see them as an example of normalization or of co-resistance?
Who again? What's the name of the group?
Standing Together. You spoke
Standing
briefly
Together.
about them earlier.
Yeah. You know, these days I'm almost looking for any kind of sign of solidarity. My only question, usually when I'm asked about groups like that, I ask, what are they doing? Not what are they saying? Have they had any of their members protest enough to be arrested? Are they willing to do civil disobedience? Are they willing to risk something? Or are they just talking? That's the criteria I use rather than look at their statements of beliefs and where they stand.
Thank you.
And you see what they're doing, right? They take the risk of, opposing the Israeli hardliners that are trying to keep the aid from going into Gaza, for instance.
Yeah.
That kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
They collect food in all sorts of places and take it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for me, that's the criteria. If they are out there putting their bodies on the line, standing in front of bulldozers, standing in front of settlers, getting themselves tear gassed, arrested, beaten, then I'm not gonna quibble with them about what they believe. We can do that when we're resting late at night with, as I said, wine and crackers and cheese. But if they're out there in the field doing
I'm sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
If they're out there in the field doing and standing together, that's all I would ask.
We can do that when the boot's off the neck, right?
Yeah.
We can have those, but if they're standing there trying to get the boot off the neck, I really like that. I really like that. Thank you for that. Joy.
Hi there. I'm very glad to be with you. I'm actually a PhD student at Gettysburg Seminary, getting a PhD in public ministry and witness. So this is a marvelous conversation to be a part of. This keffiyeh behind me, I got when I was in Gaza as a student 45 years ago, and was thrown out by the occupation forces at gunpoint because I was seeing what they didn't want me to see. So this has been something passionate for me for a while. So I'm just wondering if you can explain to me why the Leahy Act doesn't apply to American aid to the state of Israel?
It does, but nobody's applying it.
That's sort of disappointing.
There's not an Israel exception to it. There's just an Israel exception in practice, but not in law, which is common in law. Common law. I mean, common in the law when you have laws that are written neutrally and are applied.
See, there's something about, I'm a lawyer and I've been following this process of lawfare in this country. One of the things about law in the United States is either it's in the hands of the government, the prosecutor, it's not that private individual who brings up these cases, and prosecutors don't because they are political appointees and they are under pressure. Or if you have a civil action, it's so expensive and so costly. Lawyers here charge by the hour, $400-500 an hour. And if you really want good lawyers who are specialists, you have to shell out money like crazy. Yeah, law should be one of the tools that we can use. The Lehi is one, the Hickenlooper Amendment. You can't give any foreign aid to a country that confiscates American property. There's other rules about countries which use nuclear or develop nuclear weapons. They can't get any U.S. aid. There's all sorts of wonderful laws in the U.S. Which can be used, but they're not being used.
That's all right. I mean, Kamala could just come in and start applying these laws and it would make a dramatic difference.
Yes.
I'm not holding my breath.
That's the difference between optimism and hope.
I am also asked
I'm not
wondering-
optimistic.
So,
I'm also wondering, would you come, if I can get you, would you come to Gettysburg Seminary and talk to people
Well, of
here?
course, it's nearby. Absolutely.
All right, I will talk to people and see what I can do. There's still just a lot of misinformation. My experience is people don't think about Palestinians until they rise up, and then they think about him
Yeah.
in a negative way, and then they forget about him again.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to come and talk.
there are 4 more hands, Jonathan. Are you good if we do 4 more
Yeah,
questions?
let's hear all the questions and then I can answer them.
Okay. So we're going to hear the questions. Please keep them to questions and keep them as short as you can. So we'll hear all 4 questions one at a time. Andrea.
I have to unmute her.
I think she can unmute herself, but I will ask.
Oh,
There you go. You're unmuted now.
thank you. This is a question for both Jonathan and Rabbi Cat. The 1-year anniversary is coming up. What kind of activities can we and have you envision where we can pull both people together to mourn together, the civilians, and to envision a future that is equality and safety for all? How can we make it a healing event rather than another nail for polarization?
Thank you.
Next.
Riley.
So I have a twofold question. The first one is, and by the way, thank you so much for Pitfalls. I thought it was clear and very honest and beautifully stated. I wanted to ask if we can, if whether it's pie in the sky or not, if we can look to other models like in Pakistan and India before the English did the partitioning, where there was a little, it wasn't perfect, but there was more flow through with different religions in the same groups. And South Africa's reconciliation. It's hard for me to imagine this going smoothly or quickly without maybe some background to help us or other models. So I have those questions, and also on sort of a more religious point, how much do you think that the fact that these are Abrahamic faiths, known to have had what they consider to be a jealous God, play into part of this model? Though obviously colonization and territory is still what it is.
Thank you. Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question in terms of closing the loop, in terms of starting with the truth. Are there any, I am not aware, any campaigns really to expand or to put even more pressure for journalists to have access to Gaza? The power of images that, yeah, if we think about Vietnam, one of the key things were the images. Right now, because everything that we know, images are coming from Palestinians, so that's not enough. They cannot be trusted because everything that we already, it was said. So is there any campaign going on? If not, how can we organize around that? First things first, truth. Let's show, let's try to flood even more than what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. And Krista, and we're gonna stop questions there, so.
Last but not least, hi, Jonathan, thanks. My question is, what do we do in a world where the very values and international standards of decency, and I'm talking about international law, human rights, democracy, are fully ignored in the case of Palestine, and which just gives Israel full reign to inflict genocide on the Palestinian people with impunity? And in the meantime, how do we protect the Palestinians from this cycle of ongoing death and destruction in Gaza and the increasing attacks in the West Bank, including the ongoing confiscation of land? I know you said the timeline was not in centuries, but you know, this is daily deaths and destruction in the tens to hundreds. So where do we turn for that? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and answer all 4 questions. First with Andrea, activities on October 7. I'd suggest that you, if you haven't subscribed to FOSNA, FOSNA.org, we usually say what activities are taking place. There are activities that are going to take place before, on the day, and after the day. And some of them will be very interesting for you. Second question, Riley. There's some good news. There are some models of coexistence, and also there are some hints you get every once in a while that the situation of enmity and separation is not endemic. People don't realize that for like 13 centuries, until this past century, Jews and Muslims and Christians lived quite well together in the Holy Land. And there are glimpses here and there where you see there was a settler car that fell in a valley on the road between Hebron and Jerusalem, one of the few roads that have both Palestinian and Israeli cars on it. And obviously these were settlers from Kiryat Arba. But immediately Palestinian cars stopped and people ran down and tried and take the people out and rescue them. So the hatred between Jews and Arabs is neither genetic nor endemic nor eternal nor can it change. It can change very quickly. It needs some basis. There has to be some kind of equality, some kind of parity, which is, by the way, why you don't find too many fights between Palestinians and Jews or Israelis in the United States or outside the land, you know, where there is basically more or less equality. They're not sitting there as master and slave. So they get together. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't, but they don't hate each other, they don't fight each other, they don't kill each other.
What's that?
Pablo, journalistic access. Actually, the state of Israel deliberately decided that they will stop journalists from coming in, and they will target the Palestinian journalists who existed. They've killed over 100 Palestinian journalists. And they have gotten away with it largely because journalists in this country allowed them to do so. They did not stand up for their colleagues, certainly not sufficiently. Christiana Manpour would be one possible exception because she every once in a while raises that issue. But most journalists are quiet. They are complicit. They are cowards. They don't believe. They don't stand for freedom of the press. They don't stand for their journalistic colleagues. And maybe that's another battle we need to fight. We need to picket outside those journalists every time they have a press conference. Say, are you a journalist or are you just a propagandist? Why are you silent when your fellow journalists are being kept quiet? Why do you give credence to the Israeli narrative, which you cannot verify? When they talk to you about Hamas command center in a hospital, why do you repeat that and not ask to investigate to see that there is no, in fact, command center and there are no, supposedly your wonderful secret service, we have intelligence. Why don't you look critically at the facts? Why do you accept Israeli propaganda, which has been proven false again and again? Why don't you be as brave as Israeli journalists,
Right,
who are debunking these myths left and right, and you're still repeating them? Yeah, that is definitely something we need to. Oh, by the way, I should put a commercial here for my book, The Truth Shall Set You Free. It's a book that I wrote Unlike Beyond the Two-State Solution, this is a more about my own experiences and my own beliefs and my work for human rights and how I try to approach truth and get a little bit more objectivity. So if anybody is interested, it's also available in audio, if you like audiobooks as I do. Last question, Krista, about impunity. What do we do when Israel seems to have or to practice impunity, when they get away with literally with murder and with genocide, and when the international order isn't sufficiently powerful? I tell many of my friends that somehow the Palestinian people will survive this crisis. But will international law survive? Will morality and credibility of the churches and of the synagogues, will Judaism survive this crisis? Because it is a moral crisis, and it does question many of these values that we hold dear. I hope it does. I hope there will be better implementation of international law as a result of what happened. People forget that most of the current law of warfare, the Geneva Conventions and the Declaration of Human Rights and many of the conventions for the protection of women and children, etc., arose out of the horrors of World War II. That helped develop international law. Hopefully, out of what's happening now, there will be new push to have better and more effective and more enforceable laws governing the behavior of countries than we have seen so far. But ultimately, it is also an individual question and a spiritual question. Where do we stand? What do we believe in? What are we willing to risk in order to maintain these values?
Okay, let's take a collective deep breath. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for such a rich conversation and discussion. I want to just say that I don't believe in the jealous God of the Abrahamic tradition at all. That's not the God that I turn to. It's not the God that I uplift. And the God that I believe in, as I said before, is that God that's the transformative power of the universe. It's the possibilities of possibilities. It's the one that makes possible that transformation from what we're experiencing right now to what can and should and ought to be. And that force actually lives in each of us. We are that embodiment of the divine. And when we access that part of ourselves and see our divine strength and access our courage and audacity and be willing to speak truths that make ourselves and other people uncomfortable, then the divine spark that lives in all of us gets more courage and gets uplifted. And then there becomes a flowing energy of this possibilities of transformation. And we're the ones who can make that happen. And so I hope that tonight's call has given you some insights and deep things to think about, and also some courage and some willingness to put our bodies on the line. I always ask myself, what would I have done if I was alive in the civil rights movement? Or what would I have done if I was alive in slavery? We are in that moment. This is that moment. This is our moment. We are here for a reason. We matter. And even if the forces that be keep telling us and showing us with their obnoxious behavior that they're not going to listen to us, we keep going every day. And we keep being willing to say, this is not okay, not in our name, ever. And so I encourage you to get involved with Beit Tikkun or other places, wherever you are. We have a Palestinian and Israeli group that does sends out weekly calls to action. I'm a part of JVP, as are others. Please find a way that makes it possible for you to take a step tomorrow that you wouldn't have taken before you heard this call. you stand up and be courageous and maybe make yourselves and maybe others a little bit uncomfortable. You know, Abraham Joshua Heschel has this beautiful quote: the role of a rabbi, we could say almost anyone, is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So it's time. It's our time. That's why we're here. That's why you're on this call. So thank you all so much. Blessings to you, Jonathan, for all your work and for, again, taking time out of your day and life to be with us in community. I am beyond grateful for your wisdom and contribution and partnership in hopefully getting into good trouble, or at least helping others get into good trouble, and trying to make a difference in this moment, in this really challenging, horrible moment that we're living in. And yet there is, all of Jonathan and I both hold hope, and I hope all of you hold hope. Things will change, and may it be soon and in our lifetimes. Many blessings. There will be a recording of this sent out if you've registered. And thank you all so much. And just a quick plug, we're having high holiday services, both in person and online. You can go to beittikoon.org/high holidays, or just go to the main page and you'll find it.